see some things. We can start with number one.
Okay. The following video is a presentation from Resonance Energy Systems. This material contained in this video is confidential and for the intended recipient's eyes only. Viewing by other personnel or persons is unlawful. If you are not the intended recipient of this, please turn this presentation off now. What we're looking at is the development of resonant energy systems for using the Casimir effect to produce more electricity out than we actually require in. Briefly stated, what we're looking at here is this is the scope output of the readings taken in various places in the system. The top or amber is the output sine wave as coming out through the regulated transformer inverted AC, 120 volts. The next group of sine wave is the intermediate inverter sine wave. The violet trace or magenta trace is the DC voltage at the input and back to the battery, and the bottom sine wave is the resonant backfeed energy sine wave. Currently for this test we're using a Tektronix model TDS 3034 Bravo. See if I can get this for fine measurements so that there is no question about the integrity of the measurements of our equipment. This scope is commonly available in the U.S. It may not be available abroad. Also, currently being used are Fluke commonly available Model 177 and Model 189 meters. The meter on the left, reading 115 volts, is currently coming from the output transformer. The Model 189 on the right is measuring current battery voltage and return voltage to the battery from the system. This transformer that you're in front of the screen currently has the capacity to produce 120, 240, and 480 off the different taps. This particular meter here is the load and the voltage control for the transformer. In the foreground is the variac that's seen in the back, in the foreground of your picture presently. The whole unit is completely encased in this cabinet presently. Using a special capacitance inversion circuit, we're utilizing what's called the Casimir effect to produce AC 120 and DC 12, AC 140 and AC 480 as needed for commercial, industrial, or residential use. Briefly, presently, just a brief walk around the cabinet. This is a 12-volt DC load. The two 1 million candlewatt power lights in the foreground, we're going to switch those on. Those are 1 million candlewatt power lights. Here we see the back side of the transformer, the 120, 240, 480 transformer, and the variac for controlling it. These lamps are for aviation landing lights. They're 1 million candlewatt power each. The load that is placed on them, we are going to also convert transfer the load from the lighting that we are using for our output here to the lighting for we're loading the system. This is a small system, but we right now, the landing lights are putting on about a 60 amp DC load, or 60
kilowatts.
it's about a 65 amp DC load per lamp. We have a 500 watt lamp to my left here that we're currently using. The sine wave is remaining stable on the scope meter. We have stable voltage without variation and stable sine wave. To be able to represent and capture all of the data, we've compressed 4 separate channels into one screen. That's hence the reason why we're dealing with very compressed data there. We're compressing quite a bit into a small space. This is a 20 amp AC space heater that we're currently loading with. The voltage is currently remaining fairly stable at 114, 115, and there's our DC voltage on return. We're pulling 65 amps aside from those lights out the top. Once again, this system can be closed. This is a brief review and presentation of Resident Energy Systems energy generation product. Thank you.
Okay, check. Okay, we're going to look at some slides of some devices that I have done, and I'll talk in detail about those things as they come along. We have about 70 slides of devices which I have, which are working the way they're supposed to and doing exactly what you would hope they would do. Okay, the slides are ready to go.
Yeah, just still theoretically we're experiencing a little bit of technical.
Okay, can we look at those in better detail, maybe? They're not real. Are they clear enough that you can make them out?
Okay, is that better?
Those slides are real bright and real live. They're real bright and show great detail. Okay, we have a pancake device on the top there. This one, small pancake device, and it was one of about 4 dozen different devices that I've done. With the pancake device, you get an amplification of the energy such that you actually physically can generate through inductance and other things that there's an energy gain. And the energy gain is coming from the ambient background energy. It's not getting something for nothing. And we'll go into that in more detail later. Go ahead. Down below there. Okay, when I first started doing these things, I had one of Nikola Tesla books by Thomas Comfort Martin, and it's the official authorized biography of Tesla. And from that, there are a number of experiments which he shows in the book. So I went through every one of those experiments and in great detail, and that was my learning process for understanding what Tesla had done. And at the end of it, I realized that technology had advanced quite a bit, and a lot of new things which were available, which were not available at the time Tesla did his work. So all the things I've done are extensions off of Tesla, and they're beyond, in many cases, beyond where Tesla had arrived at when he had completed his work. Okay. Okay, I like to play with plasma tubes and that sort of thing. This is one of my early experiments where I took the ambient background energy using the test instruments that are used for plasma, and it worked beautifully. Okay, go ahead. Okay, this is something which I brought to the 1989 Tesla convention, and it was my black box that I brought, and it caused quite an upset and quite an uproar. But basically, it's a very simple device, and it was working completely off of the ambient background energy, and it could have basically ran forever if anyone wanted to look into it. Okay. Okay, this is one of the other devices. This one generated about 35 kilowatts. And that seems impossible with a small device like that, but it actually did. Go ahead. Next, please. We're seeing some of the other views of that particular device up close, so we'll skip along until we get through that. Next, please. Okay, that is actually turned up from where you're looking is probably okay, but what we see here, if you can read the things, this is a 35 kilowatt system. Okay, this is where I put a Tesla coil onto the toroid there, and use the Tesla coil to generate additional energy which was not present there originally, because again, all this stuff that comes from the outside or the ambient background is added into what you have, so it appears to be that you're getting energy from nowhere, which is not correct at all. You do not get energy from nowhere. It has to all come from somewhere. That is also a device I made especially for the Brazilian government and a project that I was doing for them. I was supposed to renew and remodel their whole power system for them, and they agreed. We had the written agreement, and everything was boxed up. But the problem was that every time they came up with the money to do the project, the value of the Brazilian money had decreased to where it was basically worthless. So the net result, after about 10 years of fooling with the project, it never got done. But we're still very good friends, and maybe someday we'll do it. they wanted to pay me with their money, and I couldn't. I had to pay for all the things that are necessary to make it happen with my money, but they were going to pay me with their money, and I couldn't very well do that. I didn't have quite enough funds to supplement the government of Brazil. Okay, we've gone to another device here. This is one which is currently being manufactured in Russia successfully in large quantity. And it's one of the devices that appear to get quite a bit of attention. There's eight different power sources there, and they're not intermingled. So each one of those power sources will do about 50 watts. About 50 watts. 50 kilowatts. Okay, we can go ahead. Okay, this is something which I have a patent on, which relates to getting a huge amount of energy out when you put a few milliamps of energy in, and you end up with like 100 kilowatts of energy out. And that won't make sense to anyone who thinks like an electrical system. You have to think in terms of the magnetic flux, because if you're using electrical flux, everything is dying a heat death, and you lose the energy almost immediately in electrical flux. But in magnetic flux, you can make as many copies of the original as you want without depleting the original at all. So if you're chasing electrical flux, you're chasing the wrong rabbit. You need to be chasing the magnetic resonance flux. Okay, this is a early stage of the 8-cylinder thing you saw just a moment ago, where it was demonstrated as to how simple it was and how well it worked. And this particular thing has been duplicated all over the world in many countries successfully. There have been people here who have tried to duplicate it and have done so successfully, but there are quite a few people who apparently had frustrations with this, and we need to talk about that on a one-to-one basis